The ATM screen flashes. Declined. She tries again. Declined. This is day 11. In this simulation, we're going to walk through what happens when the world's reserve currency loses credibility not over decades, but over weeks. Not through war or revolution, but through a sequence of decisions that individually seemed rational. We're using a framework leaked from internal IMF scenario planning in late 2023, cross-referenced with historical hyperinflation events in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Argentina, and Venezuela. The assumptions are conservative. The timeline is compressed. The mechanisms are real. We start on day 0 with a sovereign debt auction that fails to clear. The United States Treasury attempts to sell $124 billion in 10-year bonds. Standard procedure. Twice a month, every month, for decades. Except this time, foreign central banks don't show up. Not China, not Japan, not the Eurozone. The primary dealers step in, as they must, but they immediately try to offload the bonds to the Federal Reserve through the secondary market. The Fed hesitates. It's been trying to shrink its balance sheet, not expand it. But if it doesn't buy, yields spike. If yields spike, the entire Treasury market, the bedrock of global finance, fractures. The Fed blinks, it buys. That decision made in a windowless room in Washington before most people have finished breakfast changes everything. Because the market isn't stupid. When the central bank becomes the only reliable buyer of government debt, it's no longer a market. It's a printing press with a mission statement. Within 4 hours, the dollar index drops 2%. Not catastrophic, not newsworthy. Just enough to catch the attention of currency traders in London, Singapore, and Sydney. They don't panic, they adjust, they sell. Just a little, just in case. By day 3, the 10-year Treasury yield has risen 40 basis points despite the Fed's intervention. Mortgage rates jump overnight, refinancing freezes, housing transactions stall mid-signature, corporate credit lines tighten. The S&P 500 drops 5% in 2 days. Still, the headlines call it a correction. Analysts call it overdue. No one uses the word contagion, not yet. Day 5. The Swiss National Bank announces it is diversifying reserves away from dollar-denominated assets. They don't say why. They don't need to. Within 6 hours, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, quietly does the same. Then Singapore. Then South Korea. These are not symbolic moves. These are trillion-dollar shifts executed by central banks whose entire mandate is stability. When they move in unison, it's because they've seen the same numbers. They've run the same models. And those models say, get out. The dollar drops another 3% in a single session. Gold rises $200 an ounce. Bitcoin briefly touches $95,000 before exchanges start experiencing outages from traffic volume. The Fed holds an emergency meeting. No statement is released. That silence is the statement. Day 7. Gas stations in Florida and Texas begin manually updating prices twice a day. Not because oil has spiked, because the dollar is weakening so fast that wholesale costs are shifting intraday. A gallon of regular unleaded that cost $3.89 in the morning is $4.17 by evening. Attendants stop bothering to explain. Customers stop asking. They just pay and leave, faster than before, as if speed will protect them from the next increase. Grocery stores face a different problem. Their systems aren't built for this. Prices are set regionally, updated weekly, locked into contracts with suppliers who themselves are locked into contracts with distributors. But the currency is moving faster than the contracts. A shipment of Chilean grapes purchased 30 days ago in dollars is now worth 18% more in pesos when it arrives. Someone has to eat that margin. It won't be the exporter. It won't be the distributor. It will be the retailer, and then you. By day 9, the first major grocery chain announces temporary dynamic pricing on imported goods. Avocados, coffee, bananas, anything crossing a border. The price isn't printed on the shelf anymore. It's on a small digital screen that updates every few hours. Customers photograph the screens, post them online, and the images go viral. Not because people are outraged. Because they're calculating. They're trying to figure out what to buy now before it changes again. This is when the psychology shifts. People aren't panicking. They're preempting. They're trying to stay one move ahead of the inflation. But when millions of people try to front-run inflation simultaneously, they create the very surge they feared. Demand for shelf-stable goods rises 20% in 3 days. Not hoarding. Acceleration. Families who normally shop weekly start shopping daily. They buy what they need, plus a little extra, just in case. Multiply that across 100 million households and supply chains designed for predictability shatter under the weight of uncertainty. Day 12. Walmart, Kroger, and Target implement purchase limits on rice, pasta, canned goods, and flour, 2 per customer. The limits aren't announced in press releases. They appear as printed signs taped to shelves. Store managers tell regional supervisors they're seeing behavior they've only seen before hurricanes. Except this time, there's no storm to wait out. The hurricane is the currency. Banks start feeling it differently, not through withdrawals, through velocity. People are moving money faster, paying off credit cards early, transferring savings into foreign currency accounts, buying money orders, prepaid cards, anything that locks in value now instead of later. The average checking account balance drops 11% in a week, not because people are broke, but because holding cash feels like watching it dissolve. Smaller banks, the regionals, the community institutions, don't have the liquidity buffers to handle this kind of movement. Their reserves are calculated for normal volatility, not a systemic loss of confidence. On day 14, a regional bank in Tennessee with $18 billion in assets closes its doors 2 hours early. No announcement, no explanation. Customers show up the next morning to a locked entrance and a printed notice taped to the glass. Temporary service interruption. The FDIC steps in by noon, but the images are already everywhere. The bank had no scandals, no bad loans, no criminal behavior. It just ran out of dollars faster than it could call them back. That's the moment it becomes real for people who thought they were insulated. By day 16, 3 more regional banks are quietly absorbed into larger institutions over the weekend. The headlines call them mergers. The FDIC calls them stabilization actions. Behind closed doors, bank executives are calling the Treasury, and the Treasury is calling the Fed, and the Fed is now buying bonds it swore 6 months ago it would never buy again. The balance sheet expands by $400 billion in 10 days. The money supply follows. And every dollar created to hold the system together dilutes the value of every dollar already in circulation. This is the trap. The Fed can't let the banks fail, can't let the Treasury market collapse, so it prints. And every time it prints, the currency weakens. And every time the currency weakens, inflation accelerates. And every time inflation accelerates, more banks face runs, more contracts break, more supply chains freeze. There is no exit, only delays. Day 19. The price of bread is $8.40 at a Safeway in Sacramento. It was $4.20 3 weeks ago, not specialty bread, white sandwich bread, the kind you don't think about. Except now you do. Now you take a photo of the price tag and send it to your family group chat with no caption. They know what it means. Restaurants stop printing menus. They use chalkboards, dry erase boards, anything they can update quickly. A burger that cost $14 last week is $19 now, not because beef prices exploded, because every input, every supplier, every distributor is repricing faster than anyone can track. The restaurant isn't profiteering, it's surviving. But the customer doesn't see a supply chain, they see the price, and they stop coming. Unemployment hasn't spiked, not yet, but hours are being cut, shifts are being canceled. Discretionary spending is collapsing in real time because no one knows what their money will be worth next week. Consumer confidence doesn't erode, it evaporates. Day 23. The Fed announces another emergency rate decision. They hold rates steady. They don't cut, because cutting would accelerate the currency collapse. They don't hike, because hiking would detonate the debt market. So they hold. And by holding, they communicate the only thing that matters. They have no moves left. The dollar falls 6% that day, the largest single-day drop since the system went floating in 1971. Gasoline crosses $7 a gallon nationwide. Diesel hits $8.50. Trucking companies start refusing long-haul contracts because they can't price fuel costs accurately anymore. Shipments that would normally take 3 days are sitting in warehouses waiting for logistics companies to figure out if they can afford to move them. Grocery stores in rural areas begin experiencing shortages, not because farms stopped producing, but because no one can afford to transport the food profitably. This is when people start calling family members they haven't spoken to in years. Not for money, for plans. Where will you go? Do you have enough food? Can I stay with you if I need to? These aren't hypotheticals anymore. They're contingencies. Day 31. The average price of a dozen eggs is $11.80. Ground beef is $14 a pound. Chicken breasts are $16. Milk is $9 a gallon. These aren't regional anomalies. This is the national average. Families who earned $80,000 a year a month ago and felt secure are now making impossible calculations at the register. Do we buy the meat or the milk? Do we skip the fruit? Do we eat twice a day instead of 3 times? Crime doesn't spike the way movies suggest. There are no riots, no looting. Just a quiet, desperate increase in theft. Baby formula locked behind plexiglass. Razor blades, laundry detergent, cooking oil, all relocated behind customer service counters. Loss prevention teams double in size. Off-duty police work security at grocery stores that never needed it before. The social fabric doesn't tear, it frays. Day 38. Major cities begin seeing organized barter networks emerge online. Facebook groups, Telegram channels, neighborhood apps. People trading skills, goods, anything with real value. A mechanic offers an oil change for 2 bags of rice. A dentist offers a cleaning for a tank of gas. These aren't criminals. These are middle-class professionals trying to preserve value in an economy where the medium of exchange is disintegrating. By day 42, the term dollar-denominated becomes a red flag. Contracts, leases, loans, anything priced in dollars is being renegotiated or abandoned. Landlords start requesting rent in inflation index terms or foreign currency. Employers begin offering partial pay in goods, prepaid cards, even cryptocurrency. The IRS sends a notice reminding citizens that all income is taxable regardless of form. No one reads it. The government itself is fracturing under the weight. Federal employees in non-critical roles are furloughed without pay, not because of a shutdown, because the Treasury is rationing. Social Security checks still go out, but they're worth 30% less than they were 6 weeks ago. Medicare reimbursements drop. State governments, already fragile, begin missing bond payments. Illinois defaults first, then New Jersey. Then California announces a temporary delay in payroll for public school teachers. This is when people realize the system isn't going to step in. There is no rescue. The institutions everyone assumed were permanent are revealed to be as fragile as the currency that funds them. Day 55. Bread is $14 a loaf. The price isn't the story anymore. Availability is. Stores are getting shipments, but they're smaller and less frequent. Distributors are triaging. They send goods to the retailers who pay fastest and in the most stable terms. A Whole Foods in Manhattan gets stocked. A Kroger in rural Oklahoma gets half a pallet. It's not a conspiracy. It's logistics in a collapsing currency system. The people with resources still eat. The people on the margins start going hungry. Emergency food banks see demand triple. They run out in days. FEMA begins deploying shipments to urban centers, but the optics are catastrophic. Lines around the block. Families who 6 weeks ago were planning vacations are now waiting 3 hours for a box of canned vegetables and pasta. News cameras capture it all. The images circulate globally. The world watches the wealthiest nation in history ration food to its citizens. Internationally, the reaction is cold. The G7 releases a statement expressing concern. China offers humanitarian aid in yuan-denominated terms. Russia does the same in rubles. The offers are symbolic, humiliating, and deliberate. The global order isn't collapsing, it's reorienting, and the United States is no longer at the center. Day 68. The $20 bill, the most common denomination in circulation, buys less than a $5 bill did 2 months ago. People stop using cash almost entirely, not because it's banned, because it's pointless. By the time you receive it, it's worth less. Digital payment systems become the default, but even those are unstable. Payment processors begin charging inflation surcharges. A $50 transaction costs $53 because the processor is hedging currency risk in real time. The middle class, the buffer that absorbs shocks and prevents nations from destabilizing, is gone, not destroyed, eroded. People who owned homes, saved for retirement, planned for their children's education, are now making daily decisions about survival. The guy who managed a Home Depot is buying dented cans at a discount grocery store. The teacher is selling her car because she can't afford gas. The engineer is taking side gigs paid under the table in goods because his salary, adjusted for inflation, is now poverty level. Day 79. Gasoline is $13 a gallon. Most people have stopped driving unless absolutely necessary. Public transit systems are overwhelmed and underfunded. Cities that relied on car culture are gridlocked with pedestrians. Suburban neighborhoods, designed around two-car families and easy highway access, become isolated. People stop commuting to work. Employers stop demanding it. Remote work isn't a perk anymore. It's a necessity. Commerce continues, but it's unrecognizable. The economy hasn't stopped. It's splintered into 1,000 localized, improvised systems. Some neighborhoods run on barter, some use foreign currency, some use digital tokens or gold-backed IOUs. There's no coordination, no central system, just survival. Day 87. Bread is $19 a loaf. Ground beef is $28 a pound. Eggs are $18 a dozen. A tank of gas costs $220. A bottle of Tylenol is $30. These numbers stop shocking people. They become the new floor. Conversations shift from, "Can you believe how expensive this is?" to, "Where did you find it?" Scarcity becomes more important than price. The psychological breaking point isn't the price. It's the realization that it won't stop. There's no bottom, no stabilization. The currency is in free fall, and the mechanisms that would normally catch it, the Fed, the Treasury, international intervention, have all been exhausted. The only question left is how far it falls before something else replaces it. Day 90. A loaf of bread costs $22 in Brooklyn, $19 in Phoenix, $25 in Seattle. The variation doesn't matter, the direction does. 3 months ago, the idea that a single loaf of bread could cost more than an hour of minimum wage labor would have seemed absurd. Now it's normal. The speed of the collapse is what terrifies people. Not that it happened so fast. Historians will spend decades analyzing the decisions that led here. The decades of deficit spending, the repeated bailouts, the assumption that the dollar's reserve status was permanent. But in the moment, none of that matters. What matters is that the system people built their lives around is gone. And here's the part no one talks about in the aftermath. Someone benefits. The people who saw it coming and moved their wealth into hard assets, foreign accounts, inflation-protected instruments, they're fine. Not rich, but fine. The mega-wealthy, the institutional investors, the sovereign wealth funds, they hedged. They always hedge. It's the middle that gets hollowed out. The people who played by the rules, saved in dollars, trusted the system. They're the ones holding the bag. And when it's over, when some new equilibrium is reached, the wealth doesn't disappear. It concentrates. The family that lost their home sells it for a fraction of its former value. Someone buys it. The small business that couldn't survive the inflation closes. Someone purchases the equipment at auction. Wealth doesn't vanish in a collapse. It transfers. The simulation assumes no external war, no cyber attack, no asteroid. Just the unwinding of an economic system that ran on confidence and the speed at which that confidence can evaporate when the fundamentals shift. History shows it can happen in months. Weimar went from stable to catastrophic in less than a year. Zimbabwe's currency collapsed in 16 months. Venezuela's took longer but followed the same pattern. The mechanisms are known. The variables are always the same. Only the timeline changes. The dollar is still the world's reserve currency, for now. The Treasury market is still the deepest and most liquid in the world. For now. The Fed still has credibility. For now. But systems built on trust collapse at the speed of information. And information moves faster now than it ever has. You probably won't hear about the next failed bond auction on the news. You'll hear about it when your bank's app stops loading. When the gas station updates its prices twice in one morning. When the grocery store stops printing price tags. The signals won't be dramatic. They'll be mundane. And by the time you recognize them, the acceleration will already be underway. If this simulation feels too close to something you've been sensing, you're not alone. More people are asking the same questions. What happens when the system we assume is permanent turns out to be temporary? What does day 12 look like? Day 40? Day 90? Maybe nothing like this ever happens. Maybe the models are wrong. Maybe the institutions hold. But if you're still watching, you're already thinking about it. And that's enough to keep watching.